Anderson da Silva is a Brazilian-American mixed martial artist and boxer. He is a former UFC middleweight champion and holds the record for the longest title reign in UFC history at 2,457 days. This started in 2006 and ended in 2013 and included a UFC record 16 consecutive victories in that span. UFC President Dana White, UFC commentator Joe Rogan and numerous mixed martial arts pundits have named Silva as one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. Silva left the UFC in November 2020 and returned to boxing. Background: Silva was born on April 14, 1975, in São Paulo, Brazil. The son of a poverty-stricken family, Silva spent the majority of his childhood in Curitiba with his aunt and uncle, who was an officer with the Curitiba police force. Silva's first foray in martial arts began as a child training jiu-jitsu with neighborhood kids. As a teen, Silva began training in Taekwondo, Capoeira, and Muay Thai. Mixed martial arts career. Early career. Silva initially fought in Brazil in the welterweight category. Silva made his professional debut in 1997 with a pair of wins. Silva recorded his first loss in 2000 to Luiz Ezerto by decision. After that fight, he went on a 9-fight winning streak, winning 6 of those fights by either submission or TKO. After winning his first match in Japan, he was put up against Shudo champion Hayato Sakurai on August 26, 2001. Silva beat Sakurai by unanimous decision after 3 rounds and became the new Shudo middleweight champion and the first man to defeat Sakurai, who was undefeated in his first 20 fights. Pride Fighting Championships and Cage Rage. In 2002, Silva was scheduled to fight then-current UFC welterweight champion, and future UFC Hall of Famer Matt Hughes at UFC 36. However, Silva instead signed a contract and began fighting for Pride Fighting Championships. In his first fight with the promotion, he stopped Alex Stibling with a cut resulting from a high kick. In his next match, he won via decision against the Diet Butcher Alexander Otsuka. At Pride 25, Silva faced former UFC welterweight champion Carlos Newton. Newton tried to shoot in on Silva, but was hit with a flying knee. Newton collapsed and Silva finished the fight with strikes, winning by technical knockout. At Pride 26, Silva faced Dejo Takase. Takase, with a record of 4 wins and 7 losses, was the underdog. However, Silva was dominated on the ground for almost the entire fight before being submitted by Takase when caught in a triangle choke late in the first round. After his loss to Takase, Silva became demotivated and thought about quitting MMA, but was convinced to keep on fighting by Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Silva then left Shoot Box, joined Nogueira in Brazilian Top Team and started to fight in other promotions around the world. On June 27, 2004, Silva fought Jeremy Horn and earned a decision victory. 3 months later, Silva made his debut in the Cage Rage promotion in England. At Cage Rage 8, Silva fought and defeated noted striker Lee Murray by decision. That year, Silva returned to Pride FC on December 31 to face Ryo Chonan. Silva was in control with a takedown and body triangle in the first round. Chonan was able to counter Silva's knees from the clinch, with knees and takedowns. Chonan was perceived by some to be winning up until the finish. During the third round, Bas Rutten, commentating alongside Mauro Ranallo, stated that he believed Anderson must obtain a knockout or strong finish or he would lose the fight. Despite being the underdog, Chonan ended the fight in the third round with a rare flying scissor heel hook, forcing Silva to submit. After the loss to Chonan, he was cut by Pride. Silva continued fighting in the Cage Rage promotion, as well as other promotions around the world. Silva defended his Cage Rage title against Curtis Stout. Although he was slated to fight Matt Lindland at Cage Rage 16, Lindland's decision to fight Mike Van Arsdale at Ray's fight night put an end to the highly anticipated matchup. Instead, Silva defended his championship against Tony Freeklund, winning the fight with a reverse elbow, knocking out Freeklund early in the first round. Silva competed in Hawaii's Rumble on the Rock promotion, where he fought Yushin Okamai in the first round of the 175 pounds tournament. Though labeled as a favorite to win the tournament, Silva was eliminated from the tournament when he kicked Okamai in the face from the guard position. Okamai's knees were on the ground at the time, making the attack an illegal strike to the head of a downed opponent. Silva later said that the rule had not been properly explained to him before the bout. "When I fought Okamai, the rules really weren't explained to me properly in the event I was fighting in," said Silva. "You could kick a downed opponent to the groin or to the head when your back's on the ground. So the rules weren't explained to me properly." While Okamai was given the opportunity to recover and continue fighting, Okamai opted for the disqualification win. Silva responded by saying he felt it was a cheap, cowardly way of winning, and that people that were there saw that he was in the condition to come back and keep fighting, and he didn't. Ultimate Fighting Championship. Debut and Middleweight Championship. Record-setting championship reign. Title loss and injury. Post-championship reign. Boxing career. Professional career. Silva vs Chavez Jr. Silva vs Ortiz. Silva vs Paul. Exhibition bout. Silva vs Machado. Mixed martial arts fighting style. An expert in Muay Thai, boxing, and Taekwondo, Silva is primarily a stand-up fighter. Owner of numerous UFC offensive striking records, Silva is widely regarded as one of the best strikers in the history of MMA, and many consider him the best of all time. During his time in the UFC, he had a striking accuracy of 60%, attempting 1,300 strikes and landing 779. Silva's striking accuracy, knockout power, technically vicious Muay Thai and ability to counter-strike makes him a danger to his opponents. Silva's striking uses three major strengths: technical precision, the jab, and transitions and movement. Silva switches from southpaw to orthodox with little drop-off in effectiveness. Although it has been claimed that his ground game is not as good as his stand-up, Silva has submitted notable grapplers, including Olympic wrestler Dan Henderson, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt Travis Lutter, and Olympic alternate Kulsonen. Sponsors. A friend of Brazilian World Cup winner Ronaldo. In 2011, Silva became the first client to be marketed by 9ine, a sports marketing company co-owned by Ronaldo. Since August 2011, Anderson has been sponsored by Corinthians, his favorite football club. He is also sponsored by fast food chain Burger King. Previously he had also sponsorship deal with sportswear and equipment supplier Nike, which ended in late 2014 due to Nike's self-removal from the UFC. Personal life. Silva has 3 sons and 2 daughters with his wife, Diana. Before he began his career as a professional fighter, Silva worked at McDonald's, and also as a file clerk. He considers Spider-Man, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali and his mother as biggest of his personal heroes, and has a stated love of comic books and comic book heroes. Silva has said on numerous occasions that he believes longtime friend and former UFC lightweight champion and UFC welterweight champion BJ Penn to be the greatest pound-for-pound fighter in the history of the sport. Silva expressed interest in competing in the sport of Taekwondo and boxing. He floated around the idea of competing at the Olympics in Taekwondo and fighting Roy Jones Jr. in a boxing match. Silva became a naturalized U.S. citizen in July 2019. Filmography. Television and film. Championships and accomplishments. Mixed martial arts. Cage Rage Championships. Cage Rage Middleweight Championship. 3 successful title defenses. Shudo. Shooto Middleweight Championship, Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC Middleweight Championship. 10 successful title defenses. Unified the UFC Middleweight and Pride World Welterweight Championships. Fight of the Night vs Dan Henderson, Forrest Griffin, Cole Sonnen, Michael Bisping, and Israel Adesanya. Knockout of the Night vs Chris Laban, Rich Franklin, Nate Marquardt, Forrest Griffin, Vitor Belfort, and Cole Sonnen. Most Knockout of the Night awards in UFC history. Submission of the Night vs Dan Henderson and Cole Sonnen. Longest title reign in UFC history. Longest win streak in UFC history. Most UFC middleweight title fights. Most wins in UFC middleweight title fights. Tied for most knockouts in the UFC middleweight division history. Most successful title defenses in the UFC middleweight division. Most consecutive title defenses in the UFC middleweight division. Second most consecutive title defenses in UFC history. Most finishes in the UFC middleweight division history. Most finishes in UFC title fights. Second most knockdowns in UFC history. Most knockdowns in the UFC middleweight division history. Most knockdowns in UFC title fights. Most knockouts in UFC title fights. Most total fight bonuses in the UFC middleweight division history. ESPN.com. 2011 Knockout of the Year vs Vitor Belfort on February 5. Inside MMA. 2011 KO Kick of the Year Bazzi Award vs Vitor Belfort on February 5. MMA Live. 2010 Fight of the Year vs Cole Sonnen on August 7. Sherdog. 2009 Beatdown of the Year vs Forrest Griffin on August 8. 2011 All Violence First Team. Mixed Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Spike Guys Choice Awards. 2008 Most Dangerous Man. Sports Illustrated. 2008 Fighter of the Year. World MMA Awards. 2008 Fighter of the Year. 2010 Fight of the Year vs Cole Sonnen on August 7. 2011 Knockout of the Year vs Vitor Belfort on February 5. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Most Outstanding Fighter. MMA Most Valuable Fighter. Mixed Martial Arts Record. Professional Boxing Record. Exhibition Boxing Record.